If you've ever accidentally hovered over an ad for just 1 second too long and had that company relentlessly pester you to buy their product, you will know that there are a lot of things out there that we don't really need, but that people will tell us we must have. And that's why today I want to cut through the noise. I want to tell you the 5 must-have things to make sure your memoir is successful. Stay tuned. You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up. One thing that I love about writing culture is that we love a fun trinket. Whether this is something like a computer program, something like Scrivener, that is so fun to poke around and look at all the different things it can do, or something like my vintage looking computer keyboard that I absolutely do not use, but it looks so pretty on my desk. There are lots of things that we can buy for this work of writing, but most of them are not actually things that we need. And that's why today I wanted to hop in and give you the 5 things that you really do need. Now, none of these things require you to purchase anything, but they will make a huge difference, not only in how fast you make progress toward your memoir, but also how good you feel about that memoir. And both of those things, when they are put together, that is a recipe for success. So that said, let's dive right into it. Okay, your first memoir must-have is not a thing at all. It is a clear topic and a clear message. Now, you may have heard me talk about this before, but in our Memoir Method group program, in our trademarked way that we take people step by step by step through the process of writing their memoir, one of the things that we make folks do at the very beginning is clarify their topic and message. Now, by the time I've got people in the Memoir Method program, I find that there's not a lot of pushback to that request. But I do hear some pushback to separating out those 2 items. So I want to talk a little bit more about why I feel so strongly and why Emily and I really ask people to separate out topic from message as they work through the program on their memoir. So let's start by talking about what I mean by topic versus message, because I do find that that can be a little bit confusing. When we talk about your memoir's topic, we are talking about the actual thing that happened to you, or the thing that you did. So when we're talking about this is going to feel much more kind of concrete, much more specific. So this might sound like this memoir is about my cancer diagnosis and my journey to remission. Or it might sound like this memoir is about my first year teaching in an urban school in a large city. Or this memoir is about adopting my second child, or this memoir is about going through some particular trauma. You name it, but you get the idea. When we're talking about your topic, we want to be really, really specific. The unfortunate thing that happens to so many people as they work on their memoir is they don't narrow in that topic, and instead, by default, because we don't have this must-have, what happens is that the topic just ends up being their whole life. Well, unless you have had a very boring life, your whole life is not going to fit in a single book. So what we need to do is narrow in what the topic is. In case anyone is balking at that, that does not mean that you can't include scenes from other times in your life. It just means we're going to want to rethink how we include those to make sure that your topic is really, really clear. The second thing you need is a message. And again, we're separating this out really, really intentionally. When we talk about your message, this is often actually what people will say when I ask for their topic. Your message is simply what you want your book to teach. Now, we can say this in all types of different ways. And in fact, we have this worded in different ways within the Memoir Method step-by-step process because there are lots of different ways you can approach it. I like to think of your message as the thing that you learned and therefore the thing that you want to teach others. But you could also think of this as your theme. You could think of it as the moral. You could just think of it as the message that you want to share. What we are looking for is something much, much more abstract. And by design, it should be a little bit broader, meaning that more people should be able to find common ground with you through the message than can find common ground with you through the topic. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, by the way, about all of that in our next must-have, but for now, let me focus on message. When we think about the message, we're thinking about things like trust in God and move forward and know that you will be okay. Or something like, when you set out to heal yourself, understand that you will have to leave parts of your old self behind. Or, when you set out to understand where you come from, your identity will be shaken in that process for the better. Do you hear how these are larger, broader messages that actually could probably all fit with any of those topics that I mentioned? They are much, much broader because we want people to gather within that message after coming to us through the topic. And in fact, that brings me to the second must-have for any memoir, a defined audience. Now, again, the tendency often here is to kind of resist a little bit to define this. Oftentimes, folks will really want to say, hey, my memoir is for everyone. Or I have shared my story with so many different people and everyone resonates with it. Or I really think everyone has something to learn from my story. And you know what? I bet all three of those things are true, but it will not help you at all when you sit down to do the writing. The reason that I have included defined audience here is not because I want you to write to the audience. In fact, I talk pretty frequently about how I do not want you to do that. We must write for ourselves, and later we can edit for the audience. Rather, the reason that I want you to have a particular defined audience in mind is that just like your topic I said earlier, your audience is going to help you filter out what matters and what doesn't, how things are included and how things are lightened up or even taken out completely. When we think about our defined audience, I want you to be much, much more specific than everyone, but I also want you to be more specific than what we often think of when we talk about an audience. Oftentimes, when I hear people talk about their defined audience, they'll start with something pretty generic. So for the women that I work with, this will typically be, I'm looking for women 35 to 65. They are middle class with at least some education, and they have children, and they live on the East Coast. All of these things that are demographic markers, but that really don't tell us all that much about the people that we are hoping will read our book, right? It really doesn't help us understand what they will connect to, how they will connect to us, and how we eventually will connect to them. So as you're thinking about your audience, instead of just picking up on these pretty generic demographics, I want you instead to reframe the idea of a defined audience in terms of what we call psychodemographics. Whereas demographics are just simply the traits, usually that are observable from people that are outside looking at us, psychodemographics are much richer. Psychodemographics are how we think, how we move, where we go, who we hang out with, what kinds of things we seek out, where we get joy and frustration, pleasure and pain. Psychodemographics are not about who we are from people looking at us from the outside. Psychodemographics are about who we are in terms of our worldview, in terms of our way of being. And that's why when we start to construct our defined audience using these psychodemographics, you see where I'm going here, right? A lot of the little mini micro decisions that you're going to have to make throughout the course of writing your book are much easier to make when you know who your audience is. Now, I really want to reiterate something because I just want to make sure that no one's misunderstanding what I'm saying here. I am not saying that as you write, you need to be constantly thinking about your reader. No, don't do this. Nothing will derail your memoir faster than that. What I'm saying instead is that in the course of writing your memoir, you will not only have those major decisions that, yes, they need to come from you. You'll also have a lot of things that you could really go either way, right? It's a kind of little micro decision. Do I want this to be a flashback, or do I want to just kind of contextualize it a little bit? Do I really want to kind of go into this definition here, or do I want to just kind of contextually define it? Questions like that, where it really doesn't matter that much to you, but you do need to make a decision, those are where your defined audience can come into play. At that point, you can make smarter, more reasoned, more planned out decisions than you would have been able to make if it was just you and the keyboard. So having a sense then, not only of your defined audience, but also your topic and your message are going to give you this framework that allows you to filter your decisions through. That way, as you are moving through the book, you not only know that what you're putting out is what you want to put out, it's doing what you want it to do, you also will start to build this confidence and trust in yourself that you do, in fact, know how to make these smart, reasoned decisions, which you do. You might need a little boost to get there, but I promise you do. Okay, the third must-have in any memoir writer's journey is an outline. Now, I know sometimes I sound a little bit like a broken record, but it is because an outline is the number one thing that is going to make the difference between whether you finish or whether you put that manuscript back in the drawer, oftentimes for the second, third, fourth, fifth time. So let me talk a little bit about what I mean by an outline, and because I have heard from folks over the years that sometimes when I say outline, they're not quite sure what I mean. Let me kind of go into what I'm looking for here. When we talk about making your outline for your memoir, you need a few things here. The first thing is your outline is quite literally a placeholder for your structure. The thing that makes structure so difficult in books, but also movies, any long form artwork, is that when we are trying to hold something of that size, 200 pages or whatever it might be, we really can't carry all of the little intricacies and nuances of that story at once. So what an outline allows us to do is on paper, where we can see it, we can get that structure out of our head and then use that to place hold. So what I mean by this is we can get all of our chapters laid out. I usually recommend about 20, approximately 20. We can lay those chapters out, and then we can go back into the middle and say, you know what, chapters 5, 6, 7, I don't know if there's build here. We can play with those and still see how they work within the larger context of that outline. So the first thing that outline is going to do is hold your structure while you do your development. But the second thing an outline is going to do is quite literally serve as your writing plan. Now, I know it's difficult to kind of conceptualize what this will be like, because most of the time when I speak with women, they have started their memoirs, but usually they haven't gotten super far in. And so what happens is there often is kind of a sense that if only they had X and Y and Z, or if only they were in a place where they could A and B and C, they would have been fine to move forward. Often though, this is not true. Very, very often, the first chapter, the second chapter, sometimes a little of the third, we have been rehearsing those in our head. That is great. But when we get to chapter 18, oftentimes we have really no memory of what we thought we were going to do. And that is why I want you to not only make a keyword outline, not only put your chapter titles and maybe a word or two of what you want, I want you to actually shape chapter descriptions. Bonus, if you are hoping for a traditional deal or to work with many hybrid presses, having that detailed outline is something you're going to have to do anyway. Yes, you'll need to revise it after you're done writing to match what actually went on the page, because no plan is perfect. But having that draft started not only gives you a leg up on putting your proposal together, it also is going to be so helpful to keeping you on track, keeping you honest to the story that you really did want to tell, and just generally giving you that 10,000-foot view so that you can look at your entire story, your entire narrative arc, without having to worry that you are going off the rails. It's so beautiful, it's so important. Get your outline done. And quick plug, if you have tried to outline, if you have tried to structure, if you are feeling really overwhelmed by all of the advice on hero's journey or the 3-act structure or save the cat or all of these options, I want to tell you that I hear you. That is literally the reason that I built out the Memoir Method group coaching program to start with step-by-step instructions for all 3 of the things that I've just talked about that our memoir must have. How you get from your topic and your message into figuring out the beginning and the end of the story, into finding the key points, into drafting the outline, and even getting feedback from me and Emily. Step by step, totally foolproof. So if you are finding yourself stuck at this point in the process, you are in luck. Come join us and you will have the step-by-step guidance plus expert support that you need. You know what? That leads me right into my 4th memoir must-have, which is accountability. Now, this one is one that I have struggled a little bit with because, as you will know, if you have watched this channel, listened to our podcast, or read our blog, I am not a big advocate of the kind of accountability that sometimes feels a little bit like bullying. And in fact, one thing that I really think a lot about is the fact that when we have accountability, but we don't have love or joy or compassion or empathy, we often just have pressure. And actually, pressure is counterproductive. Anytime we start to get into something that's going to create a shame spiral, we know from so much established social science that we will not move forward. Shame is not a place that you can grow from. Shame is only a place that collapses in. So if we are trying to get creative expression, if we're trying to communicate, share our story, anything that puts us in that shame state, that is a no. So be really careful with accountability. I do not want you to get yourself a bully. Rather, what I want is for you to get somebody that will help remind you how important this project is to you. Now, I know there always are going to be points in the journey where we are so fired up, we are so ready to write, we know what we're doing, and we cannot wait to sit down. But there also are those points, and these are the points where we really need the accountability, where stuff just does not even feel possible, where it just feels like we have fooled ourselves by thinking that we could actually even do this at all. It feels like it will never get done. It feels like our life circumstances are just stacked against us to keep us from moving forward. And it just feels hopeless. And when you get in that spot, you might think you need accountability. You don't. You need encouragement. You need support and love and joyful community. And that is the type of accountability that I want for you. I want the type of accountability, not that reminds you to do your work, but the type of accountability that reminds you why you wanted to do that work in the first place. This seems, I know, so rainbows and butterflies and maybe a little woo-woo, but I'm telling you, I have had so many of our Memoir Method and other coaching clients tell me that having that just reminder that this project is important, that it matters, that you deserve to write it and you can, oh, it's powerful. It is powerful. That is the thing that will get you unstuck every single time. And that's what I mean by accountability. Somebody that is listening in to your project, somebody that is checking in, somebody that knows what that book is about, and someone who really, truly believes in you. So, shout out to the Memoir Method. If you are interested in having that accountability in a structured setting, we are open for rolling applications. You can head over to pageandpodium.com/contact. Fill out a form to meet with me. That is the first step. We'll make sure you're a good fit. And if not, I'll give you some suggestions on what you can do instead. One of the other great things, besides the accountability, besides the step-by-step training, that our members get in the Memoir Method is the fifth memoir must-have. That's community. Now, when we are thinking about writing our memoir, so often we have this cultural kind of vision in our head of the lone wolf author. So we're gonna lock ourselves in this cabin in the woods, or it's often a hotel that's been snowed in Colorado. I don't know why my vision of this is The Shining, but it is. Go with me here. At any rate, oftentimes we have this vision of solo work. We believe that if we are not doing it all entirely ourselves, then it isn't really ours. And you know what? It's not even possible with memoir. Now hold on, before you shut this video off, I don't mean that it's not possible to write a book by yourself. Of course it is. Many people have. What I mean instead is that you will not have a rewarding memoir experience if you won't let anybody else in. Maybe that'll be during the writing part. I hope it is. But if you publish that book, you have let people in. You are in community. So why not start the writing process with getting used to and comfortable with sharing what you're doing, sharing the ideas, sharing the wins, sharing even some of the writing? Why not get comfortable with having other people in your corner? Why not expect to have other people in your corner? That is the place that the most creative, the most unencumbered, the most brilliant ideas will flow out of your mind and onto the page, is when you feel so totally supported. And there's another thing that community does for us too that I think is so often overlooked. And that is that simply being around other people that are talking about the same things that you are doing help you just kind of get into the mindset, get into the identity of being a writer. Of course, in the Memoir Method, it's every single week, whatever the cadence might be for any other community. The purpose is that when you are seeing a group of people having an enriching, high-minded conversation about your craft, you can't help but continue to be energized and re-energized. When you are around other people that are talking in the way that professional writers do, you're going to feel like a professional writer. And this is where community really comes into play. Yes, community is great for cheering us on. Really, it is. Yes, community is great for getting little pieces of feedback and encouragement. Absolutely. But really, when you are in community, you are part of this thing. You are part of a writing community, and that means you're a writer. Nothing is going to speed up your process and make it feel better at the same time than feeling like you are a professional writer who deserves to write this book and who knows how to do it. So that is what we do in the Memoir Method group program every single week. I would love to have you join us. But whether you choose to join us in the Memoir Method, whether you choose to work with one of our one-on-one coaches, or whether you choose to put together these memoir must-haves on your own, the thing I want to emphasize is that all of these things are simple to get, and what they will give you is clarity. So the trick here is that when you can get these 5 must-haves together, you'll feel so clear, you'll feel so energized, you'll feel so proud and confident that you can't help but keep writing. Let me know if I can help with any of these. Be sure that you like, rate, share, review, subscribe. If you have not downloaded the Memoir Method checklist, you can get that at pageandpodium.com/checklist. And until then, happy writing. You know that feeling when a book just hits you? Not because the story is wild, but because it's shaped so intentionally that it almost makes you rethink your own story. You finish that last page and think, how did they do that? The structure, the honesty, the clarity. There's something under the surface that you just can't put your finger on. And the reason is, unless someone shows you how memoirs actually work, it's hard to translate that inspiration into your own writing. And that's exactly why we created the Memoir Method Monthly Book Club. If you want to join Emily Thrash every single month to dig into an exemplary memoir and figure out what's happening under the surface, head over to pageandpodium.com/book club.
Your first month is free, and we can't wait to welcome you to the group.